Welcome to the Casting Across Fly Fishing Podcast. I'm Matthew of castingacross.com, where I explore the quarry and culture of fly fishing. This is the 299th episode of the podcast. It is a marathon, not a sprint. It is an exercise of endurance for myself and for you, the listener, particularly if you've been around for 299 episodes. We've got a good episode today, but we also have something exciting for next week, something that I have never done before, a brand new adventure here on Casting Across. You are not going to want to miss it. But that said, in 2 episodes, it will be my next accusations podcast. What does that mean? That means you can send in your questions, your comments, and your accusations. Anything that I have said on the podcast, anything that I've written on the website, or anything else that may pop into your mind about fly fishing or fly fishing adjacent topics, feel free to send my way because I will talk about them on that podcast. I like getting that sort of feedback and questions and even borderline accusations from listeners and readers. So send that to Matthew at castingacross.com. That's Matthew at castingacross.com. Or you can go ahead and use the contact form on the website, and I will receive your inquiry. And as I always say, even if I don't address your question or your comment on the podcast, although I hope I get to, I'll always respond in kind online to you. And that's one of my favorite parts of doing this is asking questions, helping people find stuff, and interacting with you, the listener. But without further ado, we're going to talk about something that popped up because of last week's podcast. So this is a way that listeners influence the topics of the website and of the podcast. Because last week I talked about tenkara, which is a Japanese both set of equipment and technique for fly fishing. And very tongue-in-cheek, I offered a trigger warning for those people who have tenkara derangement syndrome. And this has kind of mellowed out. We've passed a couple of the more unseeming variants over the last few years, and we now are at a place where it generally just gets a little poorly executed meme every once in a while online. But people wrote in, and they knew that I was saying all those things and writing those things in good fun, but expressing that they think it's silly that people get bent out of shape about how people fly fish. Which got me thinking, there are some awfully obnoxious things in the fly fishing community. There are. Let's just be honest. To be fair, it is not exclusive to fly fishing. You go into any little niche activity or any broad activity, and there's obnoxious ideas and obnoxious people, and there's obnoxious quarters of that activity. So fly fishing is of course not immune to such things. But that got me thinking, I want to be an encouragement to you as a fly fisher, not because you need my affirmation to say the thing that you like or the thing that your friend likes is fine and to not worry about all the mean people online or the mean people at the boat ranch or whatever it may be. But it is more to encourage people that, what, if someone says something stupid, it doesn't mean it's true. And I'm not saying that you are incapable of doing that on your own, but just to walk through some things that I hear frequently or see frequently, and also talk about how maybe it's not the best way to think and maybe inconsistent even of a way to think. So if you do maybe have a little bit of a predisposition towards those thoughts and those sentiments, or if you have been the target of those kind of thoughts or sentiments, then this can be maybe an encouragement to think a little bit better about stuff. And this maybe even be fodder for next week's podcast. You might send me an email saying I'm totally wrong. But I'm all about talking about stuff like this. Like I always say, if you want straight up tips and tricks, well, go to the website, go to the podcast. There's lots of that content on there. And if you want it to be exclusively that kind of stuff, you can find things like that elsewhere on the internet. But Casting Across is about the quarry and the culture of fly fishing. And this is a culture issue. This is what I would say is I don't want to use the word toxic because that gets overused, but this is one of the unpleasant aspects of the fly fishing culture that I've been aware of since I started doing it well over 25 years ago. And I'll even say that that's the first thing that I will address in this podcast. It is the fly angler that thinks that fly fishing is only about catching fish. It's all about catching fish. It's about catching more fish. It's about catching bigger fish. It's all about catching fish. It's about being on the water and catching fish. If you want to talk about books, if you want to talk about art, if you want to talk about gear, if you want to talk about conservation, if you want to talk about community activities, then you are some sort of, compromising, mitigating half angler, that you are a fair weather fly fisher who is more concerned about how they look on the water, that is more concerned about having a cigar or having a drink with the boys, that you are more concerned about technology, and you're more concerned about seeming like some sort of tweed wearing intellectual than you are about actually catching fish. That's preposterous. In fact, I would even argue that the opposite might be true. I'm not going to judge the guy who only wants to go out and catch fish. However, fly fishing is truly more than just a rod, reel, line, leader, and fly and a couple of trout. Fly fishing, historically, has been all of those things. There's been a significant aspect of fly fishing that includes art, both in things like paintings and etchings and engravings and construction of nets and in the tying of flies and in the construction of fly rods. All of these things have been a significant part of fly fishing, both in the old world and the new. Across the country, there is this significant aspect of fly fishing. You don't go into too many fly shops that have the aesthetics of a corner vape shop where it's simply just glass and fluorescent lights and the products, right? It is bare minimum a couple of posters from companies and a little bit of kitsch here and there. And that's just one small example, but there's so much more to it. And so it's interesting that I see people complain about people talking about gear online, people who complain at fly shops about people who are, trying to do community activities, when by definition, to get online, to get on Instagram or on Facebook or something like that, then you are actively seeking those things out yourself, or you're actively seeking out an opportunity to harass somebody. This kind of thing still happened 20 years ago when social media wasn't as ubiquitous as it is, but it's happening a lot more. But it's just silly, and it's obnoxious, and it's not worth it. And for someone to say that you are less intense of an angler, or even less of an angler, period, because these are the things that you like to incorporate into your fly fishing, doesn't make them a more intense and avid angler. In fact, you look at the prominent names in fly fishing history, even just in the last half century, and those notable names, by and large, were involved in the conservation, in the education, in the industry. They lent their names to products, and they were part of advertising. You are not, you're not Lefty Kreh. You're not Bob Clouser. You're not Lee Wolf. There's a very good chance you're not those people. But they were involved in all of these things, and that does not make them any less of an angler or any other name, any prominent figure that you want to throw out there. So that's the first thing. We got to stop being obnoxious about that. All right. Second thing is a little bit similar, and it really focuses on what people choose to buy. Right. This one is an absolutely infuriating aspect of fly fishing culture once you kind of understand what's actually happening beneath the surface. So without going into too much detail, the vast majority of fly fishing gear that is produced overseas comes out of only a handful of shops. That's just or manufacturing plants is a better way to put it. So there's only a couple of companies that are actually doing their production, large companies that are doing their production of things like rods and reels here. It's just very expensive. Our economy is not friendly presently to companies to do this kind of business here. And so it's much easier, much quicker, and much more economical to outsource those things overseas. And very good things are produced, particularly in East Asia. But that happens in a small number of manufacturing facilities, and then it gets shipped over here, and different companies slap their name on it. They might have an exclusive colorway that company produces for it, things like that. But sometimes it's manufactured overseas and then it is assembled over here stateside, which allows companies to do some fun things with some customization of wrap colors, rod handle designs, things like that. Okay, but that's essentially what's happening. There's not a lot of people here in the United States that are rolling their own graphite blanks, right? So this is a lot of it is happening overseas. But of course, I want to paint with too broad of a brush. There are companies that do it, but when you get online and there's fly rod companies where you can get a really inexpensive graphite fly rod, and we'll stick with fly rods just for a moment. You can get a really inexpensive but high quality graphite fly rod. There's a good chance it's coming from one of only a couple of different shops. The same thing is true of fly line, actually. But for whatever reason, people online really trash some brands while they're okay with others when they're the exact same rod. Now, some of it could be the marketing, and I can appreciate that. Some fly fishing companies' marketing is a little bit tiresome. But to say that the product is inferior, when if you know anything about the fly fishing industry and the manufacturing of a lot of these fly rods, that they're coming off of the exact same production line, it's ignorant at worst, and it's just poorly advised at best. And then to go to the next level and criticize people who buy these things because if they're especially new and getting into the fly fishing world, they get online, they do a Google search of fly rod, they see Sage, they see Orvis, they don't want to pay $500 to $700 for a mid-range fly rod, so then they see one of these other companies and they say, I'm going to give this a shot. And they get a decent product. And I'm here to tell you, the rods that come out of these shops, they might not be as precisely crafted as the high-end stuff that's being rolled here in the United States. But if you're a halfway decent caster, it'll be a more than serviceable rod. And if the finishing process of the guides and the wrapping and the handle and that sort of stuff is done with any sort of skill, it's going to be a rod that lasts you well long enough to justify a $350 or $400 price tag, or oftentimes much less than that. So to criticize somebody for buying one of these products and just make it your mission to shame these brands is it's really just unnecessary. And I would even say that you can apply almost the same thinking to those American companies. So you have a company like Sage, a company like Orvis. I'll even call out those names. And I like Sage products. I like Orvis products. I fish both of them, and I'd be happy to fish more of them. But, you see the big guys, and people go after those big names. They, Orvis, the joke is the dog bed. Sage is the joke is it's $1,000 fly rod, and you could go down the line with all the other, whether it be Scott or Thomas and Thomas or Winston or whoever it may be, someone's going to criticize them because they are the big dog. Well, thousands of online trolls, there might not even be thousands in fly fishing, but, myriads of online trolls probably haven't dampened the business of the folks over at Farbank or the folks in Manchester, Vermont. They're doing just fine. And to shame someone because they wanted to buy the newest Helios rod, or to shame someone because they fly fish a lot and they want to try out the next best thing is silly. Now, to be fair, I would be very cautious of trying to spend your way into being a better angler. And I think maybe that's at the heart of a lot of people's criticism is the mentality that if I just buy the nicest fly rod that one of these big companies has to offer, the nicest reel and line, have it all packaged together, $1,600 out the door, and I'm going to be able to, make those 80-foot casts with pinpoint accuracy. That is foolhardy to think that. But if somebody wants to spend their hard-earned money that way, then let them do so. What is that hurting you? If anything, that's helpful because it's pumping money into these companies. And for every high-end fly rod they make, guess what they do? They make a handful of other moderately priced fly rods. It's just the way that they work. And so we can't be antagonistic towards each other about the gear choices that we make. When, I know it. I get the emails. I get put on these email lists from these East Asian manufacturers. And if I wanted to, if I had the capital and I had the desire, I could buy the same blanks. I could buy the same reel chassis. I could buy the same forceps and the same chemicals to make, to floatants and things like that, than all of the other companies that are importing do, and just, slap a different name on it, and it would be the same product for all intents and purposes. And it would be fine if people bought it, and it would be fine if they bought something different. But we can't be so bent out of shape about that. All right. So the first thing is people who think fly fishing is only just about fishing. The second thing is this criticism of what other people buy. It just boggles my mind. I mean, I could go down the list of all the different things that people get just so upset that people pay money for, because they think, and this I think is what it comes down to. One, they don't like the idea that they can spend their way into being a better angler, and two, they think that if we all buy $150 nippers, that there's never going to be $5 nippers left. It's just silly nonsense, right? Okay, so those are the first two things. The next thing is, going off of last week's podcast episode, how people choose to fish. You're a dry fly fisherman. You're elitist. You throw, big streamers. You are a knuckle dragger. You are a tenkara angler. So that means that you are, prance from rock to rock. You're a Euro nympher, and so you have an abacus and a pocket protector. I don't even know what the stereotypes are, but to be so concerned with how other people fish, honestly, I think what it comes down to is a little bit of jealousy. Like, the guy with the $150 tenkara rod that telescopes out and has no reel can go into the mountains and catch just as many fish as the guy who has the real high-end 7-foot 3-weight with a really, really nice reel with a giant disc drag that is completely unnecessary for a 6-inch trout. The Takari guys does just as fine, and so I think there's a little bit of jealousy. Or the guys who are throwing, 6.5 to 8-inch articulated streamers on 8 weights and catching the biggest trouts in the river. Trouts. There you go. You want to criticize something? Criticize me saying trouts. Catching the biggest trout in the river, the guys who are just, nymphing are upset about that. Or the guys who choose to fish dry flies because they want to fish dry flies might not be catching as many fish, and so people, want to poke fun at them because they're choosing to fish dry flies. Well, if you want to fish dry flies, by all means do it. And I think we all know, if you want to catch the most fish, Euro nymph. Use tight line nymphing tactics. It is statistically the way to catch the most fish over a long enough time period. And so I do think jealousy factors into a lot of these critiques. And it's just silly. It's just not worth it. I mean, find a hobby where you're not going to be jealous of other people. I mean, if you have to be upset about how other people choose to fish, then relax. It's just not worth it. This is one of the ones that I look back in my early days of fly fishing, and some of the older men that spoke into my formative moments. And I was using a 7-foot 3-weight almost exclusively. And they gently told me, like, you are going to have a hard time making these casts, making these mends, and throwing these flies. But it's possible, and you can do it. It's going to be a little bit more work, but if you really want to use that rod, then go for it. I remember distinctly a handful of older guys in the stream that I fished with and alongside of that said those things to me, and it was never with an air of elitism. It was never with judgment. It was just giving me the facts that these were going to be the limitations, and I'd have to find a way around them. And I really, truly appreciated that. To come at somebody and be concerned with the tackle that they use. And let's take it to the next level. The bait fisher. Or even just the guy throwing the spinning rod. He may very well have a lure where he has taken off the treble hook and put on a single hook. And in doing so, significantly reduced any sort of damage and consequent mortality that could be induced to the fish. And simply because there's a bail and a spool of line of monofilament, people somehow think that it's, this troglodyte form of fishing. I love to use a spinning rod, particularly when I am in water that is hard to navigate with a watercraft, with a canoe, for example. I think it's great. There's a lot of limitations to throwing a fly rod in those situations. And there are times where I will take my kids out and we will use bait and we will catch a mess of crappie, a mess of bluegill, and whatever, catfish, whatever else might bite. And there's absolutely nothing wrong with it. Now, of course, if you're fishing in an area where there are special regulations, then I'm going to be the very first one to gently correct somebody and tell them, you know what, you're not supposed to do that here. And they are going to, if the fishing game comes, they're going to take your stuff away and you're going to get a fine. But for the person who's doing it in a place that's completely legal, even if it is a great trout fishery, you just can't get upset about it. If you get upset about it, it's not a problem with them. It's a problem you can take up with your, whatever your local governing authority is. But it's not that person's fault. It's a completely valid way to fish. And if you follow the money and the fact that whether it be big retailers like Cabela's and Bass Pro Shop, or whether it be the actual companies that sell this stuff, the amount of money that gets pumped into your fly fishing recreation opportunities from auxiliary sources such as camping, hunting, and conventional fishing is quite significant. And so it's just not worth getting upset about. All right. There's a handful of other things I could talk about. I could talk about tweed jackets and wicker creels and how they're fantastic. Or I could even go down the line and talk about the difference between Western anglers and Eastern anglers and how, every other culture has that. The brewers that are Western and Eastern have issues. The surfers that are Western and Eastern have issues. The hikers, the Pacific Trail versus the AT. It's just different. It's not better or worse. It's different. I mean, there's very few things that are quantitative that can actually give you objective information about West versus East. We can talk about tailwater envy that a lot of the freestone guys have. We can even have how the saltwater guys think it. Once you catch a striper, you're never going to want to fish for trout again. All of those different things. They're just silly. And to make that the dogmatic thing that defines you as an angler, either in real life or in your fake online persona, it's just unnecessary. Now, you may say criticizing the critics is unnecessary, and hey, that's a completely valid argument. I just desire for the community, the culture of fly fishing to be one where there is encouragement and one where there is maybe gentle ribbing, but not true animosity. And so that is the spirit of these 20 minutes on this podcast. So once again, remember to send me questions or comments or accusations. Let me know what you're interested in hearing about in a couple of episodes. And then certainly do reach out with anything else that you'd like me to address on that podcast coming up. And check out episode 300 next week. This week on the podcast, I did a quick video about the Costa Del Mar Pro Style adjustable nose pads. So these are nose pads that got released a couple of years ago when Costa started re-releasing some of their most popular frames with Pro features. And so they are rubberized wire nose pads that you can squeeze in or push out, which the intention is that they will fit a wider variety of facial structures. And if you just slap them out of the case on your face, they might not fit. And so a lot of people kind of don't like that. Well, they're meant to be adjustable, and I have found a great way. I'm sure I'm not the only one to do it. I guarantee you I'm not. Costa might even have these instructions on their website. But I decided to just show quickly how I do it and how I've had some frames that are large and frames that are more normal size fit my face by doing these two simple steps. So you can check that out, and you can just see me in front of the camera. Wednesday's article, A Trout You Won't Catch Today. So the Paiute cutthroat, I believe I'm saying that correctly from all of my Ken Burns documentary watching. The Paiute cutthroat is a subspecies, or excuse me, a strain of cutthroat trout that is isolated in a very, very small area of northeastern California. And so I wrote just a little bit about this fish, some of the efforts that have been taken to preserve and actually expand its range, and interestingly, how the interference of people actually saved this fish in all likelihood. So you can check that out, A Trout You Won't Catch Today, about the Paiute cutthroat trout over at castingacross.com. This week's recommendation is a book. And it's a fishing book. It's not really a fishing book. It certainly isn't a fly fishing book. but it is a good book if you like kind of sci-fi-y horror stuff. It's called The Fisherman, and if you're somebody who knows about books, you've probably heard of it, by John Langan, Langan, but it's called The Fisherman, and it is a wild ride, I'll put it that way. And it also is a really good book about what fishing can do for you if you're in a bad place. And it's also a really good book about what fishing can do to you if you're in a bad place that's not so good. And it's also a good book about grief. It's a really good book if you want a picture of what grief can do to people. So without giving away too much, I definitely want to encourage you to check that out if you're somebody who likes fiction, or if you aren't a fiction fan but you do kind of like sci-fi stuff, horror stuff. It's definitely a good read. It's outside the box for me, but I read it and I enjoyed it. So I'll put a link to The Fisherman over by John Langan on Casting Across on this podcast's show notes. Thanks for listening to the Casting Across Fly Fishing podcast. Please subscribe to your favorite podcast app and then rate the podcast in Apple, iTunes, and Spotify. Then head over to castingacross.com for 3 posts a week on the people, places, and things that go into the pursuit of fish.